You know what I have beef with? That summer's over. School's back in. You know, dog days of summer are coming to a close.
It's fall. I love fall. What do you mean?
You know what? I do like to wear chacos as much as I can. So that this fall season, all the toesies are loving it.
What?
All right. What's your read? You had, let's go back to, okay, started or you started.
So I just moved. You know how you get just a ton of spam mail in general, but especially when you move. And so I've noticed, and it's so annoying, I will get these quote unquote like handwritten notes from different residential service providers. And at first, like they get me because I got the whole stack of mail. I'm like, someone wrote me a letter. Like, who is this? And then clearly you're like, no, this is printed. And I think that's so stupid. Like, why would you use a handwritten print font? It kind of defeats the purpose of this whole vibe. I'm writing you a handwritten note. Then you open it and it's like, dear homeowner. And it's clearly printed. Just don't do that. Don't do that anymore.
I think that actually highlights a really important piece on mass personalization, that we all want to personalize. We all want personalized marketing experiences and experiential experiences. But if they're done poorly, I think they almost have the opposite effect, that it sounds like that's what you are experiencing. Someone tried to make the effort to mass personalize, but you were able to recognize it and flag it almost immediately, and it has the exact opposite effect.
Yeah. It also introduced a friction point. So I have to open the letter before I even know what your business is, what it's about, if there's an offer in there, amongst other mailers that I get that very clearly has some type of promo, pricing, phone number. I don't have to open anything. And even if I immediately throw it away, at least it's, come across my brainwaves.
You wonder how they didn't go postcard on that to save production cost and postage. And I feel like we're always getting those, cash offer for your house kind of mailers. That's a straight to the garbage can.
Yeah, 100%.
Hey gang, welcome to Roast It, a podcast where two nerds decided we wanted to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of growing your business. I'm Dave Lowe, Director of Strategy and Research at High 10, and this is my colleague Kate.
Hey, I'm Kate Hatter, the Director of Digital Marketing here at High 10. Today, in the age of growing AI, I think there's a lot of fear going on for business owners, C-suite leaders. What are we doing about AI? Overall, specifically wanted to call out SEO, and where we're starting to see declined, wouldn't even say starting to. This whole year, I think a real mantra has been improved impressions, declined, or no clicks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're clearly in this era of evolution as it relates to how people are seeking information. OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, Gemini are giving Google, theoretically a real run for their money in terms of user share and attention. I think one of the really important pieces to keep in mind for us as an agency, for other marketers, for our clients, is that whenever we're in this era of sudden and intense change, I think we can adopt a really fatalistic outcome. But I think it's important to remember that the fundamentals still apply. So, whether or not we're adopting a new tool, whether or not the marketplace is shifting, we still have an obligation to learn about our customers, learn how they're seeking information, learn what's important to them, and modify our approach. And, I think about that old saying, like, TV killed the radio. And it's like, well, of course it didn't. Radio still exists, and there are applications where, radio is totally appropriate. But it's just kind of one more arrow in the quiver. It's something we have to be aware of, and utilize the tactics strategically when the situation calls for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit all the high points. Today, my goal is to talk about why we should keep investing in SEO, specifically in an age of zero-click search.
Yeah, and it seems like there are a few phrases that have kind of popped up, and I think that's almost emblematic of kind of the rapid speed at which this has all come to the fore. But one such phrase is search everywhere optimization. Kate, how do you understand that? Is that your preferred method of describing what's going on, or kind of what's in your brain as you think about what's happening?
Search everywhere optimization, I would say overall, is our industry term. Other terms that you'll hear quite often are GEO or AIO. Essentially, they're all talking about the same thing. They're meaning, very similar things. which is an emergence of AI, language learning models. People are at least supplementing, if not going away from Google to utilize things like ChatGPT. It's a new mindset and new strategies that we have to implement to optimize, to maximize, and gain visibility beyond what would be our traditional, search engine optimization.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to kind of rest on stable statistics. So in early August, we saw a lot of media reports that ChatGPT was kind of on track to meet 700 million weekly users, which is a 4x increase from prior year. So again, I think it's tempting to look at that and say, wow, this is really kind of Armageddon for search. But, 1 week prior to that hitting the news, we hear Alphabet's Q2 earnings call that search revenue is up 13%. So, those stats aren't a perfect match. There are things that Google could be doing and their algorithm and how they're handling SERP to kind of juice a little bit of that search revenue because they know that that performance would be so important for their stock price. They know that they have a gap that ChatGPT, Perplexity, and others are taking advantage of. But I kind of find solace in a weird way and those maybe seemingly contradictory statistics that, our original obligation, our original fundamental obligation as marketers remains the same, to keep an eye on the new technology, to, place it appropriately in the quiver and again, utilize it for clients and their customers when it's appropriate.
Yeah, I want to get into, like, you kind of hit on it, but essentially the don'ts of our current environment as business owners or marketers. Say the first one is kind of like this Armageddon approach, which is obviously we have an insanely new, exciting technology that humankind, has only ever really dreamed about. And now it is ready at anyone's fingertips for free across several different platforms. So this kind of Armageddon approach is we have to completely rethink everything that we're doing. We're not doing enough or we need to do more. Like, this is the end of the world as we know it, or this is the end of our current consumer behaviors that have been tried and true for the last 10 to 20 years. I think where that fear comes from to some degree is like we truly don't know. Obviously there's predictions, but we really don't know how this is going to affect markets overall. We do have predictions of what this is going to do to behaviors. I think, as you said, using, media or market shifts previously helps us to be well informed. So the introduction of television from radio, I think, is a really great example because that was also a pretty quick transition compared to some other emerging technologies over the past 150 years. David, from your perspective, I think you always provide great insight with your experience in general. But you're always one to really uphold, like, let's pump the brakes. Let's have, let's have our feelings about things, but let's, even if there's not enough data out there, acknowledge that we need more information before we act, for sure, but almost before we settle our opinions on things.
Clearly that Venmo for $20 I sent you before the episode worked, but I think it's really important to always consider context. That's my number one strengths finder. Strength is context, and I think that's super important in research. And when we're beginning projects or beginning new client relationships, really taking the time to develop that context, I think is crucial. And it's one of my favorite parts of my job. I talk a lot internally about mythology, and we've talked about it before, internal organizational mythology. And when you can build that context, I think that's how you help kind of pierce things that are, assumptions or kind of long held, sincerely held beliefs that maybe aren't actually what's occurring in the marketplace. I think Google's 13% increase in search revenue is kind of one of those mythology piercing stats, right? That ChatGPT is up, therefore Alphabet and Google must be down, and that's not necessarily the case. Not everything in life is kind of that fixed pie opportunity, which I think we see that in media, traditional and digital. It's not one or the other. It's often an and. I also think there's something interesting to your earlier point about just overall, I think the digital transformation in our business over the past 20 years, one of the promises of that transformation was that with digital, we would have certainty. How many people have seen a TV ad? There are Nielsen and lots of other measurement companies were born and offered data to help us understand that impact. But with digital came Google Analytics, and we could see very specifically, at least from a last touch effort, exactly what our marketing was driving. And I think a lot of the uncertainty, a lot of the anxiety that comes from the popularity of AI is that foundational promise of certainty that digital offered is eroding. And when we talk about search everywhere optimization or AIO or whatever we want to call it today, one of those gaps that we really don't have an authoritative tool yet is if we want to optimize in those spaces, we need to be able to prove to ourselves and certainly our clients who are paying us that this is working. And so to answer the question, how do we know that we've succeeded? How can we measure this? When there's not a really great commonly accepted answer to that question, again, I think that messes with the foundational promise of certainty of digital. And we are firmly in that era right now. I don't think it's going to last long. I'm sure something's going to come along. I think just before we hit go, that Kate, you found an article about with Gemini, maybe inserting search ads.
And I would say that's something like day to day reviewing client performance or understanding AI overuse or even like AI mode, I have not seen significantly. So that's something I definitely, have my eye on alongside the paid media department of how we can, it's not about participation, it's more about influence because with influence comes power. And I think, typically that is an advantage of early adoption.
Yeah, and it's going to be uncomfortable. The transition is going to be uncomfortable, and I think agencies and their client partners need to accept a certain level of uncertainty, and we do our best. I think again, our knowledge of how to show up and provide these AI platforms good information that will make us authoritative and appear in transactional queries or location commerce driven queries. We're gonna have to move quickly and learn really quickly and tolerate a certain level of ramp up. Things are can be less clean in those situations, but overall, it's where we're going. It's where we're going globally. So whether you are a international firm, a Fortune 500 firm, or regional or local, there's going to be some opportunity for you. And I think we all just kind of have to unify around living in that state and putting our best foot forward.
Like I said earlier, I think there's a ton of fear around that. It's just uncertainty, just general comfort in technological adoption or an understanding of language learning models in particular can be scary if you really haven't, gotten your toe wet. On the opposite side of kind of like the Armageddon, like, oh no, something that I've also seen, which is scary in its own sense, is almost like a complete denial or rejection of AI completely. And when I say denial, sometimes to the point where like, this is just a fad, this is just a trend, this is something that we have to get through instead of being one, proactive, but two, being well informed so that we can be strategic about our activities.
It's funny you say that because I distinctly remember having a conversation with my dad at Christmas a few years ago. Like, AI machine learning was starting to become more kind of in the public consciousness, or at least kind of in the nerd consciousness. And him saying, this is going to be incredible. It's going to be so transformational. I was very bearish on it, and Tim certainly proved me wrong. I think another interesting element is like Google is obviously the dominant search player, and Bing we've talked about for certain contexts as well, and that kind of reminds me of the current market share of ChatGPT and Perplexity. Copilot, Gemini is kind of mixed in with kind of other search data. So, do you ever see a world where Perplexity eclipses ChatGPT, or do you think it's maybe like a more specialized niche tool like Google, like Wolfram Alpha or something like that? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so I think just like with any new technology or a channel, there will be kind of like specialization based off of their context or their advantages. An example of that is say, like, let's look at Reddit versus the Meta network, like Instagram or Facebook. Each of these different platforms is attractive for different points of engagement, interaction. Pinterest versus Reddit even services different purposes and different behaviors associated with it. So I would say our worst case scenario is that likely these will still exist, There, of course, could be an emergence of a new tool or one that isn't successful. I think typically when we see technological or like business model disruptors enter and redefine a market, there's usually like one major player that's secondary, close to winning the race, that doesn't really make it in the end. I think kind of what comes to mind for me is in BevAlc and e-commerce fulfillment marketplaces like Drizzly is a really great example of that. That's just marketing, that's business fundamentals, is if you aren't fitting a need or if someone is fitting a need better, if you're more just like this commodity that's nice to have, you're very vulnerable in general. But two, you're kind of already informing your competitors, say like a ChatGPT's next phase of innovation, of evolution. If right now, so this is a stat from Stat Counter, among AI chatbots used for information seeking search in particular, ChatGPT has about like an 82.7% share. Perplexity is still less than 9% share. So ChatGPT is still taking the cake. Obviously, with that power and level of influence, they can take some of Perplexity's advantages and leverage that to, really monopolize the market here.
Yeah, and just the Drizzly citation is maybe a good reminder that the emergent and the market dominant, that's a temporary state. Like
Yeah, always.
RIP Drizzly, gets acquired is no more. So you wonder, I don't, still kind of seem like we're in the build and scale mode of a lot of these different platforms. So it's not like we see like a ChatGPT acquisition of Anthropic or anything like that. But I think it was a nice reminder that change is constant. You have to expect change. I remember working with a client many years ago, and we had another agency partner on this piece of business, and the owner of that firm had a tattoo that said "Beta is the new done." And I'm not a big tattoo guy. I don't know that that's right for me, but it was a nice reminder, and you have to admire his commitment to always orienting himself in that way. That was really cool.
Yeah, more of a sticker on the notebook situation for me than a tattoo for
That's
sure.
great. Hope that guy's doing well. Shout out, man.
Shout out if he's listening. Yeah, I'd say another thing that is kind of red flaggy to me that I'm hearing, not just business owners, but entire business entities now like shed the tried and true brand that they have, and their new identity is this shiny new thing, which is AI, and like owning AI. I think that has its time and its place. But again, AI is a tool, not your incredible one-stop solution, especially if you're regional or local. If the fit for your business model is not ingrained in the usage of technology for your target audience members. To go back to what you said, I think at the beginning is like the foundation of marketing of these models aren't changing. The technology enables different behaviors, but even, we as humans from the beginning of marketing, we as marketers leading different products, services, solutions in this day and age, at the end of the day, we have to service a need. We aren't even just a want. If that need does not exist, if that identity does not fit the need, then we're really at risk for not just poor performance, but becoming irrelevant without the right context.
One thing I'm really listening for, I listen to a lot of earnings calls. I think that's the number one hack for strategists of all stripes is to pick some earnings calls for, big firms or firms that are in your space or in kind of adjacent industries and give those a listen. It does not, at 2x speed, at 1.5x speed, it's not a huge time commitment. You can get an AI summary if you're really pressed for time. But one of the things that I'm hearing loud and clear in earnings calls like Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart is that those executives on those calls, either proactively in their comments or in response to analyst questions, are being very, very specific about how they're using AI and how they're translating that into improving the online or in-store experience. So, the home improvement big box, they're really focused on utilizing AI for their staff to help people with questions, to help find applications for the products. I think in some cases, I want to say it's Lowe's, one of their acquisitions that is more pro-focused. the management team was very explicit that a major driver of this acquisition was their plan tool, their AI plan tool. They can scan plans and they can come up with material lists, cost estimates that are dramatically more accurate rather than just a person eyeballing it. I mean, to hear a management team on a major earnings call like that go fully all in on AI and that being, literally a primary thesis for the acquisition, I thought that was remarkable. And again, more broadly, it's really interesting to hear how that AI interest has evolved from this general, almost aspirational interest to very very specific applications to in-store experience, or in this case, whether it's consumer driven, residential driven, or pro driven.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me. So this is like a dream project I currently have. Unfortunately, it's not the top dev priority, but we represent, a multi-location, omni-channel retailer. And so their e-commerce fulfillment and their e-commerce website is created and in partnership with us, maintained by a proprietary e-commerce tool. With that, it has a ton of marketing integration capabilities. So obviously how we manage and for our use, we're just focused on our specific merchant that we work on together, a set number of stores. Where I would love to get to is to push and collaborate with this proprietary partner. If they could aggregate all of their merchants' data and create AI personalization tools, things like personalized recommendations based off of a user's activity, previous purchase histories, integrate that with our text and our segmented email lists. It's right there. It feels like it's so close. We can touch it. Obviously, there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done. But more saying that is just an example of some of these projects are much more feasible than you think. AI can feel like this giant, big, like weight. I think for some business owners, it can even feel like a necessary evil or something else that we just have to get to either read more about or to make sure that we're strategic and up to date at the end of the day. Sometimes the hardest part is just like starting. If you don't already, I believe you have a responsibility to participate in the age of AI. I think the good news of that is that it does better inform you to make educated decisions and to form an opinion that does inform your organizational priorities, as we're coming towards the end of 2025. Definitely something to keep in mind for 2026 planning.
So I think that's a really good review of the landscape. What kind of notes do we have for how to press forward, or what kind of actions we should take?
Yeah, some advice from the bad marketing we talked about. You have your Armageddon modes. You have your, this is the shiny new thing. I'm going to drop the fundamentals. I'm going to rush to this new age of AI. Kind of have your rejection, your denial. This is not happening to us. It'll pass. Votes for everyone. And as we've echoed through this podcast, ensure you're doing all the fundamentals correctly. Again, if you are ultimately servicing your customer, your target audience member, you're going to win here. I think something that has been incredibly valuable in leading my department at High 10 and helping, our customers feel a little bit more comfortable with AI is make a mental shift from AI being like this enemy, this necessary evil. Pretend that AI is a new customer. In our zero-click or declining click search for SEO, with the new search everywhere optimization, those fundamentals for SEO, for example, EAT, making sure that you have structured data implemented. Honestly and truly, just do you have valuable content that someone would find worthy of reading, watching, spending their time on? You will be rewarded in AI algorithms, and that will be reflected across other channels as well.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I've been focusing a lot of attention on over the past several months is just using the tools. I think with technology, there's definitely an age factor here, but I think you just have to jump in and use it for yourself. Don't be afraid of it. You're not going to break anything, and just start clicking around and see what happens. And I think learning by doing, the benefit there is that you can move pretty quickly. And OpenAI Academy has been really helpful. I think a big part of how folks can make themselves more comfortable with these platforms is, again, just using them and using them well. So OpenAI Academy, why can't I not say that, is super helpful for basic prompt engineering. There's a Reddit subreddit about prompt engineering that's pretty interesting, the ChatGPT subreddit, just to kind of learn the framework. And if you're to do that, if you're to invest an afternoon, Friday afternoon or a Sunday, in learning those basics, you're going to feel much more comfortable using these tools. Their output is going to be significantly more beneficial to you by Monday of next week. There's no reason why your mastery of these tools can't accelerate that quickly. So I think that's my number one piece of advice: just use them. And these platforms, again, are already putting out, in the same way that Google's providing content guidelines and frameworks, OpenAI is doing the same. And there are a lot of prompt libraries out there. Try to avoid the ones from like Instagram influencers. Try to get some better ones, but I know Anthropic has, I think Claude is a library that you can utilize. So some of this too, while you're learning by doing is, you're going to discover use cases, and the prompt libraries can be helpful in that regard too. I think about, like the power tools section in a home improvement store. I think everyone knows what a drill is and what a circular saw is, but there are some things in that aisle that I am wholly unfamiliar with. So AI is kind of the same way. You need to learn a little bit about the application that can better help you contextualize the tool and use it effectively.
I'd say, to build on that, a great way to, like, what should I put in my prompts, not just how to build a prompt, but start with a question that you have about your industry, your competitor, your business. Ask your tool based off of that structure of your prompt to give you some cited answers. Experiment, get more comfortable, use that same question, have a language learning model format the answer a little bit differently. And I think you can, if not learn a little bit more about your business, but feel more comfortable with the tool there. And then I have an insight hot off the presses. So this morning we had some folks attend an AdFed event and came in. I think one of the questions someone had posed, where the discussion was about AI, was like, well, what tools should I be using? Like, what is the one and only thing? Which is, not necessarily the best question, because you got to find what's right for you, and it kind of depends. But I think what our team members kind of learned and expressed is, it felt really good just to talk about the challenges that we're all facing as agencies. What challenges are our clients, our campaigns facing with AI? And I think what we learned is we're not alone. Everyone is experiencing very similar, if not the same, uncertainty, challenges with technological adoption, investment in developing skills, or building, new solutions through AI. So listen, collaborate. And this could be a cool opportunity, talk to your competitors, see how they're utilizing these tools.
Don't say thank you to ChatGPT. It's costing millions.
Yeah, don't say please.
That's all we've got for today. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time for Changing KPIs, a robust discussion between Kate and I about what is evolving in that world. I hope you have a good week, good weekend, good month, good year, and we'll see you next time.
Ready to get real results? Visit HytonDigital.com.